Lisa Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. She had been working the night shift at Terran Deep Space Monitoring Station Epsilon for 3 months now, and most nights were exactly the same. She would sit at her console, watching endless streams of data from distant stars, listening to the quiet hum of space. Nothing ever happened out here in the empty void between solar systems. Tonight felt different, though. At exactly 2:47 a.m. station time, her equipment picked up something strange. A signal was coming from the direction of the Vega sector, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The signal was weak and kept cutting in and out, but there was definitely a pattern to it. Lisa leaned forward in her chair and adjusted the receivers. The signal became a little clearer, but it still made no sense. It was not random noise from a star or the usual radiation that filled space. This was organized, mathematical, like someone was trying to send a message. Her hands moved quickly across the control panel as she recorded everything. The signal used prime numbers in a sequence that could not be natural. Someone or something intelligent was sending this transmission, and they were trying very hard to make sure others would recognize it as artificial. Lisa felt her heart beating faster. In all the years that humans had been listening to space, they had never found proof of other intelligent life. Scientists had always said it was possible, even likely, but this was the first real evidence that humans were not alone in the universe. She reached for the emergency communication button. That would wake up Captain Jake Rodriguez. Her fingers stopped just before pressing it. What if she was wrong? What if this was just some new type of stellar phenomenon that she did not understand? She would look foolish for waking the captain over nothing. But as she listened to the signal, again, she became more certain. The mathematical patterns were too complex and too organized to be natural. This was definitely a message from someone with advanced knowledge of mathematics and science. Lisa pressed the button. Captain Rodriguez arrived at the communications center within 10 minutes, still putting on his uniform jacket. He was a tall man with graying hair who had served on deep space stations for over 20 years. Behind him came Dr. Amanda Bell, the station's chief scientist who studied alien life, and Ryan Torres, who specialized in decoding complex signals. "Me what you found," Rodriguez said simply. Lisa played back the recording she had made. The room fell silent as they all listened to the strange, rhythmic pulses coming through the speakers. The pattern was clearly mathematical, using sequences of prime numbers and geometric progressions that no natural phenomenon could create. Dr. Bell spoke first. "This is definitely artificial. Whoever sent this knows advanced mathematics. The question is, are they trying to communicate with us specifically? Or is this a general broadcast?" Ryan Torres was already working at another console, running the signal through various analysis programs. The signal's strength suggests it originated from somewhere in the Vega sector, probably about 27 light-years away. But here's the interesting part. The signal is Doppler shifted in a way that suggests the source is moving toward us at high speed. Captain Rodriguez frowned. "Moving toward us? You mean like a ship?" "Not necessarily toward Earth," Torres explained. "But the source is definitely in motion, and fast. Whatever is sending this signal is traveling at a significant fraction of light speed." Dr. Bell was studying the mathematical patterns more closely. "Look at this sequence here," she said, pointing to her screen. "They're using base 10 mathematics, which suggests they might have 10 fingers like humans do. But more importantly, they're incorporating physical constants, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. They're trying to establish that they understand the same physical laws we do." Lisa felt excitement growing in her chest. This was really happening. After decades of searching, humans had finally found evidence of other intelligent beings in the universe. "Can we decode the actual message?" Rodriguez asked. Torres shook his head. "Not yet. The mathematical header is clear enough, but the main body of the transmission is much more complex. It's going to take time to figure out their language and communication methods. How much time? The captain pressed. Could be hours, could be days. Depends on how similar their thinking is to ours. Dr. Bell was still studying the patterns when she suddenly looked up with a worried expression. Captain, I think this might be urgent. Look at the way the signal is structured. The mathematical introduction is followed by what appears to be the same sequence repeated over and over again, but each repetition is slightly weaker than the last. What does that mean? Rodriguez asked. It means they're running out of power. Or time, or both. This feels like a distress call. The room became tense. If this was indeed a distress signal from an alien civilization, then somewhere out in space, intelligent beings might be dying while humans struggle to understand their message. All right, Rodriguez said decisively. I want this signal decoded. As fast as possible. Torres, get every communications specialist on this station working on this. Bell, contact Earth Command and tell them what we've found. Use the quantum entanglement communicator. I want them to know about this immediately. Should I wake up the other department heads? Lisa asked. Yes. Everyone needs to know about this. And Lisa, the captain paused. Good work. You might have just made the most important discovery in human history. Over the next 6 hours, the station buzzed with activity like never before. Every available person worked on decoding the alien message. The breakthrough came when Dr. Bell realized that the aliens were using visual symbols converted into mathematical representations. Once they understood this basic principle, the rest of the message began to make sense. What they discovered made everyone in the room feel sick. The message was indeed a distress call, sent by a species that called themselves the Zelani. They lived on a planet in the Kepler 442 system, and they were under attack by something they called the hegemony. The Zelani described themselves as peaceful people who had never fought wars or built weapons. They were scientists, artists, and philosophers who had lived in harmony for thousands of years. But now their cities were burning. The message contained star charts showing their location, population estimates that dropped with each update, and desperate pleas for help from anyone who might receive their transmission. The Zelani had somehow learned fragments of various galactic languages, including broken human languages, and their message ended with the same phrase repeated in dozens of different ways. Anyone who receives this, please help us. We are dying. The final part of the message contained coordinates and technical specifications for their solar system, along with detailed information about the attacking force. The hegemony appeared to be a massive military empire with technology far beyond what the Zelani possessed. The alien message painted a picture of systematic destruction, with peaceful cities being destroyed one by one, while helpless civilians fled in panic. Captain Rodriguez stood in the communications center, staring at the decoded message on the main screen. Around him, his crew worked quietly, all of them affected by what they had learned. Somewhere in space, an entire civilization of peaceful beings was being destroyed by attackers who showed no mercy. Get me a direct line to Earth. Command, Rodriguez said quietly. Priority Alpha. Tell them we need to speak with Commander Brooks immediately. As the quantum communicator established connection with Earth, Rodriguez wondered what humanity's response would be. They had just learned they were not alone in the universe, but they had also learned that the universe contained horrors beyond imagination. The question now was whether humans would choose to get involved in a conflict that was happening dozens of light years away, against an enemy whose capabilities they did not fully understand. But as Rodriguez looked at the desperate message from the dying Zelani civilization, he had a feeling he already knew what humanity's answer would be. 3 days after the distress call was decoded, the scout ship Meridian dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Captain Tony Nash stood on the bridge, watching the main screen as his sensors began scanning the area ahead. What they found made his stomach turn. The system was full of ships, but not the kind he had hoped to see. Massive alien vessels, each one the size of a small city, hung in space around the blue-green planet that was the Zelani homeworld. Smaller ships darted between them like angry insects, and even from this distance, Nash could see bright flashes of weapons fire striking the planet's surface. "Take us into the asteroid belt," Nash ordered his pilot, Kelly Wright. "Keep us hidden behind the largest rocks you can find. I want to get closer, but I don't want them to see us coming." Kelly was an excellent pilot who had served on dangerous missions before, but even she looked nervous as she guided the ship between the floating chunks of rock and ice. The asteroids would help hide them from enemy sensors, but they also made flying much more dangerous. "How many ships are we looking at?" Nash asked his sensor specialist. Chris Davis. Chris worked at his console for several minutes before answering. "I count at least 40 large vessels, Captain. Each one is roughly 3 kilometers long. There are also hundreds of smaller ships, probably fighters and support craft. This is a massive invasion fleet." Dr. Maya Singh, a missions expert on alien societies, was studying the images on her screen with tears in her eyes. "Look at the planet's surface," she said quietly. "Those bright spots are cities burning. The hegemony is systematically destroying every population center on the planet." Nash moved closer to her station and saw what she meant. The planet that should have been covered in lights from Zelani cities was mostly dark now. Only a few areas still showed signs of civilization, and even those were under constant attack. Streams of energy weapons fell from the orbiting ships like deadly rain. "Are there any Zelani ships fighting back?" Nash asked. "A few," Chris replied. "But Captain, you need to see this. The Zelani vessels are not warships. They look like exploration ships, maybe research vessels or cargo haulers. They have no weapons that I can detect. They're trying to evacuate civilians, but the hegemony ships are hunting them down." As if to prove his point, the sensors showed one of the Zelani ships being destroyed as they watched. The alien vessel was trying to escape the planet's gravity. Well, with what appeared to be refugees on board, when 3 hegemony fighters caught up with it. The small Zelani ship had no chance. It exploded in a brief flash of light, taking hundreds of innocent lives with it. Nash felt anger building in his chest. These were not soldiers dying in battle. These were civilians being murdered by an enemy that showed no mercy to the helpless. "Take us closer," he ordered. "I want to get detailed scans of both the hegemony ships and what's left of the Zelani forces. Earth Command needs to know exactly what we're dealing with here." Kelly guided the Meridian deeper into the asteroid field, using the rocks for cover as they moved toward the inner system. The closer they got, the clearer the picture became, and the worse it looked. The hegemony ships were built for war and nothing else. Their hulls were covered in weapon emplacements and armor plating. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious opposition. Nash could see that they were not just destroying military targets. They were deliberately targeting schools, hospitals, museums, and other civilian buildings. "This is genocide," Dr. Singh said quietly. "They're not trying to conquer the Zelani. They're trying to wipe them out completely." Communications officer Pete Garcia had been working to intercept radio signals from the alien fleet. Suddenly, he looked up with excitement. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions between the hegemony ships. Their communications are not encrypted. They must be very confident that no one can challenge them." "Can you translate what they're saying?" Nash asked. "Some of it," Garcia replied. "Their language is similar to some of the patterns we found in the Zelani distress call. It will take me some time to work out the details, but I'm getting the general meaning of some conversations. Nash waited while Garcia worked. The next few minutes felt like hours as they watched more Zilani ships being destroyed and more cities on the planet being bombed into rubble. Finally, Garcia spoke again, and his voice was filled with disgust. "Captain, you're not going to like what I'm hearing. The hegemony forces are talking about the Zilani like they're not even intelligent beings. They call them soft meat and easy prey. But the worst part is what they plan to do with the survivors." "What do you mean?" Nash asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "They're not planning to enslave the Zilani for labor, sir. They're talking about keeping some alive for entertainment purposes. They seem to think that torturing intelligent beings is amusing." And the rest ... double quotes. Garcia paused, looking sick. "The rest they plan to eat." The bridge fell silent. Every human on the ship stared at Garcia in horror. They had known the hegemony was attacking the Zilani, but they had assumed it was for resources or territory. The idea that an intelligent species would systematically hunt and consume another intelligent species was beyond their worst nightmares. Dr. Singh was recording everything on her instruments, but tears were streaming down her face. "This is evil," she whispered. "Pure evil. How can any intelligent species become this cruel?" Nash was about to respond when Garcia held up his hand for silence. "Wait, I'm picking up a transmission from what appears to be the fleet commander. Let me see if I can translate this." He worked for several minutes, occasionally asking the ship's computer for help with translation. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking with anger. "The transmission is from someone called Admiral Vex Star. He's speaking to his subordinate commanders, giving them new orders. Here's what he said. Let this serve as a message to any other weak species in this galaxy. We are the hegemony. We take what we want when we want it. Resistance is futile. Surrender is temporary, and mercy is a concept for the weak. When we are finished here, we will broadcast images of what we have done to every star system within 50 light years. Let them all know what happens to those who cannot defend themselves." Nash felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. The hegemony was not just destroying the Zilani. They were planning to use this genocide as a threat against other peaceful species. They wanted to spread fear across the galaxy, to make other civilizations surrender without fighting. "Sir," Chris said urgently, "I'm detecting energy signatures from several hegemony ships. It looks like they're scanning this asteroid field. I think they might have noticed us." Nash made a quick decision. "Kelly, get us out of here. Maximum speed, back to the outer system. We need to report what we've seen." The Meridian began moving away from the inner system, but they were not fast enough. Alarms began sounding as Chris detected 3 hegemony fighters moving toward their position. "They've found us," Chris announced. 3 ships incoming, and they're fast. Much faster than anything in our fleet. Can we outrun them? Nash asked. Kelly was already pushing the ship's engines to maximum power. "Not in normal space, sir. But if I can get us far enough away from the planet's gravity well, we can jump to faster than light speed." The next few minutes were terrifying. The hegemony fighters were indeed faster than the human ship, and they were gaining quickly. Energy weapons began firing past the Meridian, missing by increasingly smaller margins. 30 seconds to jump. "Point," Kelly announced, sweat beading on her forehead as she pushed the ship harder than it was designed to go. 20 seconds, she called out as another energy blast barely missed their hull. 10 seconds. The hegemony fighters were close enough, now that Nash could see them clearly on the screen. They were sleek, deadly-looking craft that moved with predatory grace. But there was something about the way they flew that bothered him. They seemed overconfident, like they had never faced an enemy that could challenge them. "Jump!" Kelly shouted, and the stars suddenly shifted as the meridian entered faster than light travel. They had escaped, but Nash knew their problems were just beginning. They had witnessed genocide on an unimaginable scale, committed by an enemy with superior technology and no moral limits. Worse, that enemy now knew that someone had been watching them. As the ship raced back toward human space, Nash wondered what Earth's response would be. The hegemony clearly believed that might made right. That superior technology gave them the right to destroy anyone weaker than themselves. They were about to learn that humans had very different ideas about how the strong should treat the weak. Nash just hoped that humanity's anger would be enough to overcome the hegemony's technological advantages. The message they would carry back to Earth was simple. Somewhere in the galaxy, evil had a name, and it was hunting innocent people for sport. The question now was whether humanity would choose to do something about it. The emergency session of the United Earth Assembly had been going on for 6 hours, and the debate was getting more heated by the minute. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the Great Hall, watching the recorded footage from the meridian over and over again. The images of burning Zawani cities and destroyed refugee ships played on the massive screens, while politicians argued about what humanity should do. General Patricia Lee stood at the central podium, waiting for the room to quiet down. She was a veteran of 3 colonial wars and had never backed down from a fight in her life. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform was covered with medals earned in battles across human space. "Enough," she said, and her voice cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent. "We have been talking for hours while innocent people die. Every minute we waste in debate is another minute that the hegemony uses to murder civilians." The representative from the European Federation stood up. "General Lee, we understand the emotional impact of what we have seen, but we must be realistic. The hegemony has technology that is clearly superior to ours. Their ships are faster, their weapons are more powerful, and they have a fleet that outnumbers anything we could put together. What you are suggesting is suicide." General Lee's eyes flashed with anger. "What I am suggesting is that we do our duty as civilized beings. We have just witnessed the systematic extermination of an entire peaceful civilization. The hegemony believes that might makes right, that the strong can prey upon the weak without consequence. They are about to learn what happens when you threaten innocence in front of a species that evolved from predators." The representative from the Asian Commonwealth spoke next. "But General, even if we wanted to help, how could we possibly get there in time? The Kepler 442 system is 27 light-years away. By the time our fastest ships arrive, the genocide will be over." "Then we make sure the hegemony pays for what they have done," Lee replied. "And we make sure they never do it again to anyone else." The intercepted communications from Admiral Vextar were clear. They planned to use this genocide as a threat against other peaceful species. If we do nothing now, the hegemony will spread their reign of terror across the galaxy. Dr. Sophie Grant, the Assembly's chief advisor on alien psychology, stood up from her seat in the gallery. "General Lee is right. I have been studying the hegemony communications that our people intercepted. This species has never encountered serious resistance. They have been bullying weaker civilizations for so long that they believe they are invincible. They have no concept of what happens when predators meet other predators." The representative from the African Union raised his hand. "Dr. Grant, what exactly are you suggesting? That we can somehow defeat an enemy with superior technology?" Grant smiled grimly. "Technology is not everything. The hegemony has advanced ships and powerful weapons, but they have never fought an enemy that thinks like humans do. They expect their opponents to either surrender immediately or fight in predictable ways. They have no experience dealing with the kind of creative, ruthless tactics that humans develop when we are truly angry. General Lee nodded. Dr. Grant is correct. I have been reviewing our military capabilities, and while the hegemony has advantages in some areas, we have advantages in others. Our kinetic weapons may be primitive by galactic standards, but they are devastatingly effective. Our nuclear arsenals, our chemical explosives, our guided missiles, all of these are weapons that the hegemony has probably never encountered. The debate continued, but Lee could see that the mood in the room was changing. The initial shock and fear were being replaced by something else, a cold, focused anger that she recognized from her years of military service. Humans were at their most dangerous when they were protecting others. The turning point came when the representative from the American states stood up. He was an older man who had lost his son in the colonial wars, and his voice shook with emotion as he spoke. My friends, we are debating whether to help people who are being murdered while we sit here in safety. What kind of species would we be if we turned our backs on genocide because it was inconvenient or dangerous? This Alani sent out a cry for help, and by God, they are going to get it. The vote was not even close. 312 representatives voted to authorize military action against the hegemony. Only 18 voted against it. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth was united behind a single cause. The mobilization that followed was unlike anything in human history. Within hours of the assembly vote, every shipyard in human space began working around the clock. Military vessels that had been in maintenance were rushed back into service. Corporate fleets from mining companies and shipping corporations volunteered their vessels for conversion to military use. But it was not just the big corporations that answered the call. Small business owners offered their cargo haulers. Wealthy individuals volunteered their private yachts. Even civilian families with small personal spacecraft asked how they could help. The message was clear. Humanity was going to war, and everyone wanted to be part of it. Dr. Ian Foster led the crash program to weaponize human technology for space combat. He was a brilliant engineer who had spent his career designing mining, equipment, and construction tools. Now he was figuring out how to turn those same tools into weapons of war. The beautiful thing about human technology, Foster explained to his team, is that most of our tools can be weapons if you use them right. These mining lasers can cut through asteroid rock. They will go through alien ship hulls like paper. These construction charges can move mountains. Imagine what they will do to an enemy vessel. The weapons development program moved at incredible speed. Kinetic projectile launchers that could accelerate chunks of metal to significant fractions of light speed. Nuclear warheads mounted on guided missiles that could track enemy ships across vast distances. Chemical explosives that could be delivered by boarding parties or attached to enemy hulls. But the most important development was not in weapons technology. It was in tactics. Human military leaders began developing new strategies based on the strategies. Assumption that they would be fighting an enemy with superior technology but inferior adaptability. Admiral Kate Morrison was put in command of the assembled fleet. She was a small woman with steel-gray eyes who had earned her reputation fighting pirates in the outer colonies. She stood before the assembled captains in the largest briefing room on Luna Station and laid out her strategy. The hegemony expects yous to fight like the other species they have encountered, she said. They expect long-range energy exchanges, predictable formations, and civilized rules of engagement. They are going to get none of those things. We are going to fight like humans, dirty, creative, and absolutely without mercy when it comes to protecting innocent people. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the solar system was a sight to behold. At its core were the great dreadnoughts of the Earth Defense Force, their hulls bristling with newly installed weapons. Around them flew converted cargo ships, their holds filled with marines and boarding equipment. Mining vessels carried massive kinetic weapons that could punch through any armor. Even luxury yachts had been fitted with missile launchers and particle beam weapons. But the most impressive sight was not the ships themselves. It was the faces of the people who crewed them. Humans from every nation, every background, every walk of life had volunteered for this mission. They were united by a single purpose that transcended all their old divisions: the need to protect innocent people from monsters. Captain Rodriguez, who had been promoted to admiral for this mission, stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance and looked out at the assembled fleet. More than 800 ships of every size and type, all crewed by volunteers who had left their families and their comfortable lives to fight for people they had never met. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Tell them we jump to faster than light. Speed in 10 minutes. Our destination is the Kepler 442 system. Our mission is simple. We are going to show the hegemony what happens when you hurt innocent people in front of humans." As the fleet prepared to jump, Rodriguez thought about the message they would be sending to the galaxy, not just to the hegemony, but to every peaceful species that might be listening. Humanity was saying that genocide would not be tolerated, that bullies would not be allowed to prey on the helpless, and that there was at least one species in the universe willing to fight for what was right. The stars shifted as 800 human ships entered faster than light travel, carrying with them the hopes and fury of an entire species. They were heading into battle against an enemy with superior technology and greater numbers. But they had something the hegemony had never encountered: the righteous anger of a species that had evolved to protect its pack. Behind them, Earth continued its preparations for war. More ships were being built, more weapons were being developed, and more volunteers were signing up to fight. The message was clear. If the hegemony wanted a war with humanity, they were going to get one that would be remembered across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, just as the hegemony was beginning their final assault on the last Zelani city. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display as her sensors painted a picture of the battlefield. Ahead, the situation was even worse than the reconnaissance reports had suggested. Only one city on the planet below was still sending out signals, and it was under constant bombardment from a dozen hegemony ships. The rest of the planet was dark and silent. "How many hegemony vessels?" Morrison asked her tactical officer. 42. "Large ships, Admiral?" "Approximately 300 smaller craft. They're arranged in a standard orbital bombardment formation around the planet." Morrison studied the display. The hegemony fleet was positioned exactly as human military doctrine would predict. They had overwhelming superiority and saw no need for defensive formations. Their ships were spread out to maximize bombardment coverage, with minimal screening forces watching for threats. "They're not even trying to defend themselves," observed Captain Martinez, Morrison's chief of staff. "They must think no one would be crazy enough to attack them." "Then they don't know humans very well," Morrison replied grimly. "Signal the fleet. We attack in 3 waves. First wave hits their screening forces and draws their attention. Second wave goes after their main battle line. Third wave protects the Zelani evacuation ships and provides cover for our boarding parties." Admiral Vexstar was in his command center aboard the hegemony flagship Dominator when his sensors detected the approaching human fleet. He looked at the tactical display with mild curiosity rather than concern. 800 ships seemed like a large number, but most of them appeared to be converted civilian vessels with primitive technology. "Interesting," Vexstar said to his subordinates. "It appears another weak species wants to interfere with our work. How thoughtful of them to bring themselves to us, instead of making us hunt them down later." His tactical officer studied the human ships more closely. "Admiral, These vessels are using very basic technology. Kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, nuclear devices. Their ship designs are crude and inefficient. This should be over quickly. Vexstar waved dismissively. Send the 5th and 7th patrol groups to deal with them. The rest of the fleet will continue the bombardment. I want the last Zelani city destroyed before we waste time cleaning up these newcomers. But the human fleet did not behave like any enemy the hegemony had faced before. Instead of the expected long-range engagement, the human ships accelerated directly toward the hegemony forces at maximum speed. They ignored the energy weapons fire that began hitting their shields and armor, focusing entirely on closing the distance. The first shock came when the leading human ships reached effective range, instead of the careful, measured exchanges common. In galactic warfare, the humans opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic projectiles moving at incredible speeds punched through hegemony shields like they were not there. Nuclear warheads detonated against ship hulls, sending massive shockwaves through the alien vessels. What kind of weapons are these? Demanded Vexstar as his ships began taking heavy damage. How are they penetrating our shields? His weapons officer looked confused. Admiral, these appear to be purely kinetic and chemical weapons. Our shields are designed to deflect energy beams and plasma charges. We have no defense against solid projectiles moving at these velocities. The second shock came when several human ships simply rammed hegemony vessels. Captain Ben Taylor led the first ramming attack, driving his converted cargo hauler directly into the side of a hegemony cruiser. Just before impact, he and his crew evacuated in escape pods, leaving the ship's computer to complete the attack. The explosion, when the two ships collided, destroyed both vessels and damaged 3 others nearby. They are destroying their own ships to damage ours, Vexstar said in disbelief. What kind of species does this? But the most terrifying moment for the hegemony came when the human boarding parties arrived. Commander Taylor and his Marines used small, fast ships to attach themselves to hegemony vessel hulls. They cut through the armor with industrial-grade, cutting tools and poured into the alien ships like a flood of death. The hegemony had never encountered anything like human close quarters combat. Their species had evolved on a world with lower gravity and weaker predators. They were taller and more agile than humans, but they lacked the bone density, muscle mass, and pure aggressive instinct that came from evolving on a death world. Taylor and his Marines moved through the hegemony ship like they were born for this kind of fighting. Their compact, muscular frames were perfect for the tight corridors of a spaceship. Their reflexes, honed by millions of years of evolution as pack hunters, made them incredibly dangerous in hand-to-hand combat. The hegemony crew tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not for use inside their own vessels. Meanwhile, the humans carried weapons specifically designed for boarding actions, shotguns, flamethrowers, and explosive charges that could clear entire corridors. Admiral Vexstar watched in horror as ship after ship reported that they had been boarded and were falling to internal attacks. His crews were panicking, abandoning their posts and trying to flee to escape pods. The humans were not just defeating them, they were inspiring pure terror. How is this possible? Vexstar demanded. They are using primitive weapons and primitive tactics. Why are we losing? Dr. Grant, who was monitoring the battle from the human flagship, could have answered that question. The hegemony had become so accustomed to fighting weaker species that they had forgotten what real combat looked like. They expected their enemies to be intimidated by superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They had no experience dealing with an enemy that simply did not care about the odds. The battle reached its turning point when Admiral Morrison ordered the third wave to begin rescue operations. Human ships dove toward the planet's surface, ignoring the hegemony bombardment. to reach the surviving Zelani evacuation ships. The aliens were amazed to see these strange vessels arriving not to conquer or demand tribute, but simply to help. Captain Rodriguez led one of the rescue squadrons, his ship loaded with medical supplies and emergency equipment. As his crew worked to transfer wounded Zelani civilians to safety, he could not help but notice how different they were from the hegemony. Where the hegemony were tall and predatory, the Zelani were smaller and more delicate, with large eyes. That seemed to hold infinite sadness and gratitude. "Why do you help us?" asked one of the Zelani leaders through a translator. "We have nothing to offer you. We cannot defend ourselves. What do you gain from this?" Rodriguez looked at the alien being, thinking of his own children safe at home on Earth. "We gain the knowledge that innocent people can sleep safely tonight. That's worth any price." The end came quickly after that, with half their fleet destroyed or captured and their crews fleeing in panic. The remaining hegemony ships began to retreat. Admiral Vexstar found himself alone on his flagship, most of his crew having abandoned him when human boarding parties breached the hull. Commander Taylor and his Marines found the hegemony admiral in his command center, standing over a console that showed the complete destruction of his fleet. Vexstar was a tall reptilian creature with 4 arms and cold, intelligent eyes. Even defeated, he radiated arrogance and contempt. "You have won this battle," Vexstar said through his translator, "but you have gained nothing. The hegemony is vast. We have fleets in 1,000 systems. You cannot stop us all." Taylor looked at the alien commander with disgust. "Maybe not, but we're going to try. And every time you attack innocent people, we're going to be there. Every time you think you can prey on the weak, humans are going to show up and make you regret it." Vexstar could not understand this motivation. "Why do you fight for them? They offer you nothing. They cannot defend themselves. What do you gain?" Taylor's answer was simple and final. "We gain the knowledge that innocent people can sleep safely tonight. That's worth any price." The Battle of Kepler 442 was over, but its effects would ripple across the galaxy for centuries. The hegemony's surviving ships fled to spread word of what had happened, not of conquest or technological superiority, but of a species that fought purely to protect others. On the planet below, the surviving Zelani emerged from their shelters to find their world liberated by beings they had never met. The humans immediately began providing medical aid, food, and supplies, asking for nothing in return except the knowledge that they had done the right thing. Admiral Morrison stood on her bridge, watching as human ships worked alongside Zelani vessels to evacuate the wounded and begin repairs. Around her, communication arrays picked up signals from across the galaxy, other species who had heard about the battle and were sending messages of thanks, hope, and requests for protection. "Signal Earth Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them the Zelani are safe, but our work is just beginning. There are other peaceful species out there, and now they know they have protectors. The hegemony is going to test us again, and we need to be ready."